Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. So yesterday I did a video on the 2026 best Republican realistic scenario for the Senate elections and how I think they can go. In today's video I'm planning to do the same thing, but this time around for the best case scenario for the Democrats and what they can do. I had the Republicans getting about 56 Senate races in 2026 in the best case scenario. Today I'm going to do the Democrats. The Democrats' problem for 2026 is the Senate map is a lot more favorable towards the Republicans than the Democrats are. Yes, there are some pickup opportunities for the Democrats in North Carolina and Maine, but Republicans also have a pretty good pickup opportunity in Georgia and maybe even in Michigan. So the map has a lot of Republican senators, and it's a very uphill battle for Democrats. But in their best case scenario, there are a few places where the Democrats could actually do very well. But for the Democrats, it starts with holding the places they do currently have. And the first Senate race I'm looking at is the state of New Hampshire. This is Democratic incumbent Jeanne Shaheen. She is likely going to face up against former Republican Senator Scott Brown, ran back in 2014 and was Massachusetts Senator until 2012. He is, I will say, probably one of the top recruits Republicans can have for this race. But yes, he wasn't a very high-profile candidate, but Jeanne Shaheen did defeat a Republican opponent in 2020 by over 15%, which is a safe Democratic margin. Yes, back in 2014, the New Hampshire race was only a 3.2% win, but given Jeanne Shaheen's track record in the Democratic best-case scenario, I think starting New Hampshire off as a least likely Democrat, which is over 5%, under 15%, is certainly very attainable in a Democrat best-case scenario, and something that I think is probably more in touch with reality than this race going red, but we're going to have to wait and see. But in the Democrats' best case scenario, I certainly think Jeanne Shaheen starts off as the favorite. So Democrats are up to 45, Republicans are at 51. The next race we have is the state of Michigan. This is Democratic Senator Gary Peters. I do know Wikipedia does not have a page for this one yet, but I do know Gary Peters is up for re-election. He did win back in 2020, 49.9%, against John James, 48.2%. John James is likely one of the best recruits Republicans have for the U.S. Senate in the state of Michigan, and he was not able to win in 2020. The only cause of concern for Democrats is the 2024 Senate race, where Slotkin defeated Mike Rogers by only 0.3%. But in a Democratic wave year, 2026, where Donald Trump is not on the ballot, Republicans seem to do worse down ballot when Trump is not actually on it. So unless something changes, I think Gary Peters winning this race is certainly very attainable. The question is, what's the margin? I think I have the race starting out in my own prediction as leaning Democrat, which is in between 1 to 5%. But I think it is certainly possible that if Gary Peters does very well and the Democrats do very well, a likely Democratic win of over 5% is not necessarily too unrealistic in a Democratic wave year. So those two seats, which Democrats, do currently hold, would put the Democrats at 46, Republicans at 51. There is one more seat the Democrats hold, that is the state of Georgia. This is Democratic candidate Jon Ossoff. And Ossoff is certainly going to be in for a tough re-election campaign, especially if he does face off against Governor Brian Kemp. It is going to be very tough for him. But let's not forget, Jon Ossoff did win back in 2020 with 50.6% after a runoff election with Republican Senator David Perdue. Ossoff did actually lose on election night, but he did not get over 50%, David Perdue, enough to beat Jon Ossoff and made it go to a runoff, and Ossoff was able to win. I think, look, to be honest, Ossoff is a very skilled politician. He's a very good performer in Georgia as election turnout machine. He's very good. He's probably the top Democrat in the state for getting people to turn out and vote for him. His biggest problem is going to be, though, that Georgia did just vote for Donald Trump by 2 points, and he will likely be going up against a Republican governor. But that being said, maybe Brian Kemp doesn't run for this race, or we do see some similar trends where even though Georgia did go for Donald Trump by 2 points, we did see the Atlanta, Fulton County area in places like DeKalb County, Clayton County, and Cobb County did get actually a little bit more Democrat in 2024. So it is possible that even though Georgia did swing to the right statewide, maybe Georgia and the Atlanta area continues this trend to the right, where Ossoff can be able to pull off another very close victory in Georgia. The only problem for Ossoff is I just have a very hard time seeing him really win by more than 1% of the vote, just because it's so close. And like we saw back in 2020, it was 50.6 to 49.4. This would be about 1.2%. I'm having a hard time seeing him really do much better than that. I'll put it in lean Democrat for now, but maybe by only like 0.5%, no more than that, does he exceed the 1% threshold. But I don't think Ossoff losing in 2026 is necessarily like 100% going to happen. I think it's certainly very, very possible Ossoff could win this race. And the Democratic best case scenario, I would expect him to, but that's going to be a very, very tight one to watch going forward. 2 Senate seats remaining on the toss-up category are North Carolina and Maine. And these are 2 places that are both very prime Democratic pickups and the top Democratic pickups of the 2026 cycle. Starting with North Carolina, where as North Carolina is a Republican state than Maine, I would actually argue North Carolina might be an easier pickup opportunity than Maine. And that is due to the popularity of Senator Thom Tillis. Thom Tillis will likely, if he is their Republican nominee, will either be going up against Representative outgoing Willie Nickel or Democratic outgoing Governor Roy Cooper. Both are 2 candidates who do have relatively high name ID in the state of North Carolina, and from the polling I've seen, both relatively well approved of. And Thom Tillis' biggest issue, like I mentioned, his popularity. Another one he's never gotten more than 50% of the vote in North Carolina. He got 48.7% in 2020, and he got 48.8% in 2014. So for Thom Tillis to win this race, he would have to do something he has not yet done, which is likely get more than 50% of the vote. Because unless there's a third-party candidate running in 2026 that's able to get more than 1% of the vote, there's a very realistic scenario here where this could be Roy Cooper versus Thom Tillis, and we could see a repeat of the 2016 North Carolina governor election, which was Cooper versus Pat McCrory. And in this one, I'll show you the results. Cooper ended up winning by just 0.22%, but the third-party candidate took enough vote away where Cooper was able to get 49% and win a very close election. And I think in the Democratic best case scenario, I'm sure Democrats would love to win North Carolina by like 5 points or something, but I really don't think it's realistic in a state that has consistently voted Republican, except for the governor's races since 2008. I do think, however, Cooper winning against Tillis by under 1% and flipping the seat blue is actually something that is very attainable, and in a Democratic best case scenario, I think certainly realistic. Will it happen on election day? I'm not sure, but it's one that I think is not outside the realm of possibility. So North Carolina is certainly a top pickup opportunity for the Democrats. The last remaining toss-up state in the 2026 Senate elections is the state of Maine. Maine, this is Republican Senator Susan Collins. She did win back in 2020 by over 9 points, but the one good thing the Democrats have going for them in this race is Susan Collins, even though it is Maine, she did get reelected. She has upset recently a lot of the more pro-Donald Trump Republicans of the party, which could potentially be good news for the Democrats. And she's also in a state where Kamala Harris actually did win at the presidential level, 52% to 45% over Donald Trump. So she's the only Republican senator in a state that Kamala Harris won, which is good news for the Democratic chances at flipping the seat. The other good news for the Democrats is all the potential candidates are actually very high-profile names, including the outgoing governor of Maine, Janet Mills, Shelley Pingree, representative from Maine's 1st District, Jared Golden, representative from Maine's 2nd District, and Troy Jackson, president of the Maine Senate. All 4 Democratic potential candidates are actually highly profiled names and certainly potentially very good candidates. The biggest problem actually for Maine was that back in 2020, Susan Collins didn't have to go to ranked choice voting to win. She won outright, getting over 51% on election day. The Democrats are going to have to get Susan Collins under 50% and likely go to ranked choice voting to have a realistic shot at defeating Collins in 2026. In the Democrats' best case scenario, I think that is certainly possible. And I want to show you the House map where this is actually what happened with Jared Golden. He did not get over 50% on the first ballot. Him and Austin Thurl were stuck in a 0.2% race, and it had to go to ranked choice voting, and after the final round, Golden ended up winning by 0.6%. I think something similar could happen in the state of Maine against Susan Collins in a scenario where the Democrats win, where Susan Collins is likely leading or barely losing on election night to the Democratic opponent, and after the final round of ranked choice voting, then we have the Democrats narrowly winning by under 1% against Susan Collins. I think the Democrats learned their lesson last time. Susan Collins is a long-term Republican incumbent. She's very formidable and very hard to beat. And I think if the Democrats do win this race, I think it would likely be under 1%, given how popular Collins is in Maine and how much of an electoral juggernaut that she is. That being said, in the Democrats' best case scenario, in a state that voted for Kamala Harris, I do think Maine going blue is certainly very possible. So after all the toss-up seats, this gets Republicans at 51, Democrats are at 49. And it's really tough for the Democrats because I did have, for instance, on the Republican side, New Hampshire and Michigan, which I have as a lean Democrat right now. I was able to put them both in the Republican column. Senate races that the Republicans are likely favored to win, that the Democrats could potentially win in their best case scenario, are not that many. Because a lot of the states that are likely Republican did vote for Donald Trump and voted for him by a lot. For instance, Alaska gets mentioned. If Mary Peltola runs for this race, I think it is certainly possible she could win that race against Republican Dan Sullivan. If she does run, I may take it down to lean Republican. But again, we did just see Donald Trump win the state by 14 points, so that'd be a very massive swing. Again, the only good sign would be Peltola did just lose this race by only 2%, so it would certainly be much more competitive if she were to run for that race, but I'm a little skeptical how that would go. Montana voted for Donald Trump by over 20 points. The only good sign would be that we did just see a very close Senate election where Tim Sheehy versus Jon Tester, but even that ended up being about a 7-point win for Tim Sheehy over Jon Tester, who was the incumbent. So even if Tester did win, am I going to automatically make this race either Democrat or even lean Republican? I honestly probably wouldn't, especially considering he won't be the Democrat this time around, or the incumbent this time around. Iowa could potentially actually be interesting because Joni Ernst won last time by about 6 points. And yes, even though Donald Trump did just do very well in 2024, winning by 13 points in Iowa, maybe Joni Ernst is unpopular come 2026, and maybe we'll see a situation where Iowa goes down to lean Republican. Maybe Democrats have a great resurgence in Iowa and can tilt it blue. I wouldn't bet on it, but that's something I could potentially see happening. The state of Ohio is going to be a special election to fill the seat led by J.D. Vance. The Democrats' best case scenario for the state of Ohio really all revolves around who's the Democratic nominee, either going to likely be Sherrod Brown or Tim Ryan. Both of them are pretty strong Democratic recruits, in all honesty. The only thing is Sherrod Brown will probably be a bit stronger than Tim Ryan, but we did just see Sherrod Brown lose a very close election to Bernie Moreno by about 4%. In 2026, in Democratic best case scenario, maybe it's a more favorable election year and Ohio is more in play. Brown did just lose in a likely Republican margin. I don't think he would win this race, though. I'd put it as tilt Republican at absolute best. But I could see the Democrats trying to contest Ohio as well. Florida, at this point, I kind of think is just a non-starter for Democrats trying to be competitive there. So the Democrats' map is really difficult. Getting to 49 Senate seats in this map would actually be amazing for the Democrats, because then what looks like the Republicans are going to hold the Senate easily in 2026 and probably hold it again in 2028. If the Democrats get to 49 Senate seats in 2026, then that gives them a very realistic shot at flipping the Senate going into 2028. Because 2028, if I'm correct, will be the 2022 Senate map. And in the 2022 Senate map, there was Ron Johnson winning very closely in Wisconsin, Ted Budd winning in North Carolina. And Republicans are likely going to try and target Nevada and Arizona and Georgia and try and win there, and maybe even Pennsylvania against John Fetterman. But the Democrats will have 2 pickup opportunities in North Carolina. And let's say Democrats in 2028 hold Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia. All they have to do is pick up one of North Carolina or Wisconsin along with winning the presidency, and the Democrats have the Senate majority. So I think the Democrats will likely concede that in 2026 they will not be winning the Senate, but if they could do in their best case scenario up to 49 Senate seats, it puts them in a position for the long run in 2028 where flipping the Senate is certainly very possible. But for the Democrats to do this, they do have to win Maine, North Carolina, Michigan, Georgia, and New Hampshire, 5 Senate races that I do expect to be very competitive in 2026. So that is my best case scenario for the Democrats. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, leave a comment below telling me what you think about these best case scenarios and what you think it could be for the Democrats and other potential races to watch very closely. That'll do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in a future video. That will do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to give it a like. And if you really liked it, please remember to click the subscribe button. And make sure you turn post notifications on so you always get notified when I post a new video. That way you never miss one. Also, please remember to share this video with your friends and family if you really like the video. And remember to stay tuned because I'll be posting at least one video every single day leading up until Election Day. So I'd really appreciate it if you keep coming back and watching those videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video.